production and growth. A country's standard of living depends on the ability of the country to produce goods and services. Within a country, there have been a big change in the standard of living over time. Living standards, as you may recall, guys, from previous topic, can be measured by real GDP per person, and that varies significantly among nations. The most developed countries have real GDP per person that may be 10 to 20 times that of the poorest countries. How about we spend a bit of time? Let's look at some figures on real GDP per capita for various countries. We are talking about real GDP per person. Remember, guys, real GDP divided by the size of the population. That will get you real GDP per person. So we're talking about US, Australia, Europe's Big Four, as well as the Eastern European countries. Over time, as of the year 2010, real GDP per person of the US is about that much. Okay? Australia is slightly lower than US. Europe's Big Four is slightly lower than Australia. But you see, guys, the growth or the rate of growth of those three follow similar pattern. Okay? With the Eastern European countries here, guys, you can see 1990 to 2010, it's actually growing quite fast, guys. Okay? But as of 2010, you can still see here that US real GDP per person is 4 times larger than the Eastern European countries. Okay? US real GDP per person is significantly larger. Imagine, guys, those African countries will be somewhere there. Okay? Okay, very interestingly here, guys, let us look at the growth of real GDP per person of our Asian countries, of the East Asian economies, Hong Kong, Singapore, Korea, Taiwan, China. Real GDP per person in East Asian economies has converged towards that in the United States. These economies are like fast trains running on the same track at similar speeds with roughly constant gaps. Okay? So you can see, guys, real GDP per person for these East Asian economies are growing much faster than US. You can see from the slope, from the steepness of the graph here of US as opposed to these East Asian economies that you can see are growing faster. So developing countries are growing faster than developed countries. Hong Kong and Singapore are the lead trends and runabout. Okay? In fact, we can see here, guys, in the case of Hong Kong, the real GDP per person in Hong Kong is now slightly higher than that of the US. Singapore is just slightly lower than that of the US. So what kind of trend do we see here, guys? These East Asian economies are catching up to the developed economies. Hong Kong, Singapore are the lead trends and runabout. In fact, Hong Kong and Singapore are about 15 years ahead in front of South Korea, 20 years ahead in front of Taiwan, and almost 40 years ahead in front of China. But again, I want to emphasize here that these East Asian economies, they are growing very fast. They are developing very fast. Okay? And some of those countries are now catching up to the US. How can that be so, guys? We are going to answer that in our discussion in this topic also. Particularly, you will see, I will refer to Singapore in the latter part of my presentation.